Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We're just going to give you a minute here to get all join us on this session today. We're really looking forward to this. So welcome and thank you for joining Women's Way for the Closing the Gender Wealth Gap. We need to talk about retirement, a gender justice issue. I am Diane Corman-Levy, the Chief Disruptor of Women's Way, and I'm delighted that you all decided to join us for the next 90 minutes to talk about a very important topic, retirement. While we wait for folks to sign on, I would appreciate you taking a poll. I think Jess is going to drop it in, located in the chat box. We want to know if this is your first time attending a Women's Way event. I know for some of you, you've been loyal followers and coming to us all these sessions, but we love new people joining and participating and learning more about the work we're doing. So just take a second to fill that out. So I'm really excited about this session. And it's really, this session is part of a year-long series whose purpose is to educate different stakeholders about the drivers of the gender wealth gap and action steps each of us can take to close the gender wealth gap. Since October 2020, we conducted sessions that address strengthening the early childhood education sector, investing in women-owned businesses, gender and racial disparities in healthcare, increasing access to affordable housing, improving financial capability of women, and promoting equity and grant making. And today's session focuses on retirement and how it is a gender justice issue. You will hear from 4 amazing speakers, moderated by another amazing woman, who will address the issue from a provider, an advocacy, and lived experience perspectives. You will have opportunities to ask questions to the speakers via the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best to address as many of your questions as possible. We are also recording the session, so and it will be made available for you to, if you want to view it again, and for those who could not attend today's session. Finally, to create a safe space for all of us to engage in honest and challenging discussions, we ask each of you to abide to the session norms, and I hope they're listed in the chat box because I can't see the chat box. But we really try to create safe spaces that are grounded in curiosity and trust and respect, because we like to have open and honest conversations about these really important topics. So before we introduce you to the panelists and moderator, Kelly Shear, the director of the Gender Wealth Institute, and I are going to spend about the next 10 minutes providing an overview of the economic state of women and children and why Women's Way is investing its resources into addressing the gender wealth gap. And it helps provide some context on these topics such as retirement, such as the gender retirement gap. All right, let me get my, so I first want, is everyone seeing the next slide? Okay, I first want to thank, we do have some sponsors for our session, M&T Bank, Wilmington Trust, Ballard Spar, and FS Investments. Thank you for your support. It helps us to provide these sessions for no cost to individuals. So thank you for that generous support. So just real briefly, for those who are new to Women's Way, and I hope some of you are, we are the leading nonprofit organization dedicated to the advancement of women and girls and gender and racial equity. And we were the first umbrella funding federation in the United States specifically dedicated to women's issues. So we've been around for 44 years working on these issues that directly impact the health and well-being and lives of women and girls and people who identify as women. So I always like to talk about a little bit about the economic state of women pre-COVID and post-COVID. And pre-COVID and post-COVID is not a very positive picture. Pre-COVID, 80% of workers in the US were living paycheck to paycheck, and majority are women. 40% of adults were not able to cover an unexpected $400 expense. Majority, again, are women. So they don't even have $400 in an emergency savings account. Philadelphia had the highest poverty rate at just above 25% before COVID, and it's not much better. And it's the highest among the 10 largest cities. And the region's largest demographic group living in poverty were women ages 25 to 34. And that really has not shifted post-COVID. Even more compelling and disturbing is the gender wealth gap. Single white women own 32 cents on the dollar compared to single white men. But if you compare Black and Latinx women to white men, they own less than a penny. And we're going to talk about why that is and how that's related to the retirement gap, which is also pretty dismal. 80% of women are likely to be living in poverty by the age of 65. That's just daunting and very disturbing. And if these current trends continue across health and political and education equality, we will not hit gender parity until 2133. That's over 100 years from now. So we had to make some changes here. Post-COVID, we've heard a lot of women dropped out of the workforce. Or nationally, 2.5 million women lost their jobs or dropped out of the workforce, and nearly 2 million remain unemployed. So workforce participation rates for women hit 30-year lows when they actually were increasing, where women were almost over 50% of the workforce. That's not true anymore because of the pandemic. And some of the driving factors are women account for 74% of employment in high contact occupations, such as domestic care, food services, right, hospitality, and a lot of those lost jobs. And a lot of women left those jobs just because there was so much risk in doing those jobs. And then there's a lack of childcare infrastructure. I know we've been hearing a lot about that from the Biden administration, but women literally cannot afford to stay in the workplace because of low wages that they're making and the high cost of childcare. And we have one of the worst childcare infrastructures of any advanced country in the world. And then lower paying jobs without benefits and paid family and medical leave are dominated by women. Kelly Shear is going to talk a little bit more about this. This is kind of referred to as occupational segregation. And these all related to the retirement crisis we're seeing. So this was a point that came out in an article that if conditions for families don't improve, and basically if levels of maternal labor force participation and work hours experienced during the pandemic persist long-term, lost wages would amount to over $64 billion per year. So, it's really having a huge impact on our regional, our local, and our national economy when women are not in the workforce. So it has a huge economic impact, not just on the families and the women themselves, but on our economy. So what's the state of retirement for women? There's a $7.7 trillion retirement income gap. And people, like I said, 80% of women that are 65 or older are close to living in poverty. And part of it is we're also living longer, and also the cost of the end of our lives is extremely expensive. Then half of American households have no retirement savings at all. I mean, nothing, not an IRA, nothing. And a lot of them are women. And among 55 to 64-year-olds who do have a retirement account, the median value of that account is $104,000. Tell me how you're going to live off $104,000 when another issue is we're living to like our 80s and 90s. It's not possible. And again, a lot of these individuals are women who also tend to be caregivers of their parents. So it's a very complex situation. So what are the causes of the gender wealth gap? And Kelly's going to talk a little bit about this in relation to the retirement gap, but basically there's still a wage gap. Women earn less than men for two reasons. One, even for the same jobs, they get paid less. And two, occupations dominated by women are valued less in our country, and therefore they get paid less. They're more likely to be denied mortgages, loans, or to be overcharged for them, even though women have a better record of paying back loans and mortgages than men, but there's all this gender bias. And related to that, they're more vulnerable to predatory lending. And another very disturbing, and we're going to be talking about the college student debt crisis in September, is they hold more debt, including 2/3 of all student debt. Women do. So women are getting more degrees than men right now, college degrees, but they're also holding on to more of that student debt. And then they suffer the effects of occupational segregation. Kelly's going to talk a little bit about that. And a lot of this majority of unpaid caregiving, which we'll hear more about that during the discussion today. And then there's the whole issue of sexual and reproductive oppression and economic insecurity. And of course, there's a huge attack on reproductive justice and freedom right now. And that has an economic impact on women as well. So, why do we invest in women? Well, first of all, we should be investing in every life, every person's life. But we believe, and research shows, women are the backbone of our economy. And research has showed across the world that gender, wage, and wealth equity positively affect any country's overall health, education, and economic indicators. I mean, there's data that shows that across all countries and across the entire world. Research has also shown that women are the greatest determinants of social and educational outcomes of our future workforce. And what that means is parental assets, particularly the primary caregiver, which happens to be majority women, are the strongest predictors of children attending and graduating from college. So we always say, if oh, we want to invest in children, we'll invest in the mothers, invest in the primary caregivers. And then decreasing wage deficits and increasing wealth are not only poverty reduction, but economic growth strategies. So if we actually close the gender wealth gap, we'll see an overall GDP gain of over $4 trillion or over $13,000 per person by 2025. So there's a huge economic, empowering women is smart economics. So we're really working hard at Women's Way to create an inclusive and equitable economy. We do want a new normal because the old normal wasn't working, folks, for a lot of women and a lot of families. And it requires a new, bold vision, one that provides solutions to centuries of systemic exclusion, extraction, and exploitation that have continually undermined economic potential in the United States. So we're here to kind of talk about this vision and how we're addressing it, and how hopefully all of you who are here today can be part of this vision. So I'm going to hand it over to our fearless leader, Kelly Sheard, and talk about the Gender Wealth Institute.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Wonderful. So my name is Kelly Sheard. I'm the director of the Gender Wealth Institute within Women's Way. And the Gender Wealth Institute, you might remember us as Weese, and this is an extension of Weese. So that's our strong foundation there, where we are focused on building upon the network of our active partners to advance economic insecurity. And now with the Gender Wealth Institute, our mission is to close the gender wealth gap in the greater Philadelphia region by advancing research and practical solutions that build wealth for women who are economically insecure. Next slide. So our approach to change within GWI is to close the gender wealth gap by these three strategies: by convening, which is building a learning community of stakeholders; by innovating, which is building, testing, and scaling solutions; and mobilizing, which is building the capacity of actors to transform systems. And that's how we will close the gender wealth gap. Next slide. So I'm here to provide some framing and context for the connection between white supremacy and the gender wealth gap, as well as how that gap shows up in retirement savings for women. So you might be thinking, why are we even talking about white supremacy? You might associate this with the ugly behavior of folks on the fringe, folks who are troubled, but white supremacy is much more than that. It's a tool and method that creates, maintains, and perpetuates all gender and racial inequities. So we want to move people from thinking of white supremacy as the work of a particular group like the KKK, and instead help people understand white supremacy as the operating framework or the motherboard of how inequalities work. Next slide. So this slide provides an explanation of what white supremacy is and what it is there to do. I mean, we want you to think of white supremacy as a tool. So white supremacy is a pseudo-scientific concept of race to create whiteness and a hierarchy of racialized value in order to do these three things: protect and hoard power, disconnect and divide, and justify dehumanization. Next slide. White supremacy as a tool gets its fuel from spreading ideology. So this slide shows some of the ideas that originate from white supremacy, and they're ideas that you may have heard, seen, or noticed. They aren't always overt, and so often through cultural hegemony, white supremacy becomes like the air we breathe. So you might have experienced or seen some of these cultural ideas, and that's all related back to white supremacy. Next slide. So white supremacy is a project of psychic conditioning and toxic belonging. And I'll just give you a moment to read the slide to yourself and the quote by Alice Walker. It's important to know that white supremacy is not just a tool used by white people. Remember the three things that white supremacy is here to do, and that is justify dehumanization, protect and hoard power, and disconnect and divide people from each other. So how does this show up in your life, and where might you be practicing it or upholding it? These are important questions to consider. Next slide. Moving into today's topic, we use the framework of white supremacy to answer these questions. How did we get to a place where women are paid less and thus have less money to save for retirement? And then how did we get to a place where the economic system is not set up to serve the needs of women as workers? Next slide. So to answer these questions, we go deeper to examine the values that are intertwined in this crisis. So we look at the ways that we value work. Who is doing what and why? We also examine the values in our current economic system that justifies and attempts to explain away economic inequality. Next slide. We draw your attention to racialized patriarchy. This is a distinct offshoot of our main tool, which is white supremacy. Next slide. So to start, we know that white supremacy is an operating framework that relies on patterns of dehumanization and devaluation. Racialized patriarchy is an offshoot of this. So the process of racialization is where people are separated and categorized by hierarchy for the purpose of privileging whiteness. So we take pseudoscience and faux biology and attribute undesirable characteristics to anyone not white. We make these undesirable characteristics genetic, and we then crystallize these myths into biases that inform laws, policies, practices, and culture. Taking a look at the limits of the gender binary, patriarchy is the use of the male-female binary to monopolize social, political, and economic power to privilege men. So there, we create a system where cultural ideas about value are attributed to and played out through sex roles. We then drive home the idea that biology drives a common gendered experience. And then we crystallize those myths into biases that inform laws, policies, practices, and culture. So when you put them together, we get racialized patriarchy. And why? Remember, that's to protect and hoard power, to disconnect and divide, and to justify dehumanization. Next slide. So bringing this into our topic today and borrowing from professor and author Eric Olin Wright, in a just society, all persons would have broadly equal access to the material and social means necessary to live a flourishing life, where a person's capacities and talents have developed in ways that enable them to pursue their life's goals. We know that the US does not function this way. Thinking back to our topic of racialized patriarchy, we see how our ideas about the work of women and racialized minorities, coupled with our economic system of racialized capitalism, leads to gaps in levels of retirement savings. The work of women becomes biological, inherent, and thus devalued and subjugated. The work of racialized minorities becomes ripe for exploitation. And exploitation is a specific kind of economic inequality where the rich are rich because the poor are poor, which reflects an inherent imbalance of power. I'll just give a second for folks to read this slide as well. It's a lot of concepts. Next slide. The economic legacy of white supremacy and racialized patriarchy shows up as pay disparities, as lost time and generational wealth transfers, as higher levels of debt and little to no protection from abject poverty. And we'll talk a lot more about this in our panel today and how that relates to retirement savings. While upward mobility is not impossible for women, momentum, direction, and power are greatly impacted by the system that we're in. So here at Women's Way, we reject the myths of exceptionalism or the idea that says, hey, if Oprah did it, so can I. We reject the ideas of meritocracy or if I work hard enough, I'll receive everything that I deserve. And instead, we call for a reckoning that looks squarely at systems designed to privilege few and exclude many. We use our collective agency to create new realities for not only ourselves, but for our families and our neighbors and our communities. So we'll explore this and unpack this more in today's panel, and we hope to provide a way for you to understand how we got here, but also what we can do to create new realities for everyone. Next slide. And now I'm happy to introduce our panelists and our moderator for today. So I'll start with Yocasta Lora. Yocasta serves as an Associate State Director of Advocacy and Community Engagement at AARP, Pennsylvania. She implements national and state initiatives to strengthen and align state and local advocacy and community relations to create sustainable housing, transportation, and public spaces that are affordable, accessible, and livable for people of all ages. Yocasta has served as an advisor and board member for multiple nonprofit and government agencies. Currently, she serves as a board member for the Delaware Valley Smart Growth Alliance, the City of Philadelphia Office of Community Empowerment and Opportunity, Shares Food Program, and ASE. She is passionate about creating equitable spaces that intersect design, policy, and governance while transforming the built environment and focusing on sustainable, equitable, and inclusive growth. Yocasta has a Bachelor of Business Administration from LaSalle University and received certificates in women's leadership from Yale University and communication strategy from Harvard University. Welcome, Yocasta. Next, we have Allison Kvikstad. Allison is a certified financial planner and has more than 25 years of professional investing experience. She joined Ellevest from Wells Fargo's Wealth Management Group in San Francisco. Her career has been focused on managing wealth for high net worth individuals, families, and private foundations. She has a master's degree in finance from Golden Gate University. She has held board positions at Dress for Success in San Francisco and the First Tee of Oakland. She has led financial literacy programs at Girls Inc. in Alameda County, cbseeds.org in Memphis, Tennessee, and various women's groups within public and private companies. Welcome, Allison. Next, we have Teresa Muldrow. Teresa Muldrow, or Tree, is with Women of Color in the Global Women's Strike, which is based at the Crossroads Women's Center in Germantown. Tree is a member of the Coalition to Abolish Death by Incarceration. Tree is a mother and grandmother who became disabled in her 40s and raised 3 young boys as a single mother on Social Security disability. She was also a low-paid caregiver for her parents. She is now a receiver of care by another low-paid caregiver. Welcome, Tree. Next, we have Rita-Soledad Fernandez Paulino. Rita-Soledad Fernandez Paulino is a queer Mexican-American and the founder of Wealth Para Todos, a company with a mission to ensure more BIPOC, women, and LGBTQ+ folk have a financial plan to retire early. Through her one-to-one work with clients, workshops, weekly newsletter, podcast interviews, and social media content, Soledad hopes to equip her gente with the tools they need to work because they want to, not because they have to. Welcome, Soledad. And finally, we have our moderator, Marguerite Weese. Marguerite Weese serves as COO of Wilmington Trust's Emerald Family Office and Advisory and National Director of Family Legacy Strategies. Emerald provides a robust platform of strategic advisory services and solutions for successful executives, entrepreneurs, and their families. She's been teaching estate planning at Philadelphia area law schools and is currently an adjunct professor at Drexel University's Klein School of Law. Marguerite is a regional board member of the Anti-Defamation League's Philadelphia region, and she is currently a volunteer for Compass Pro Bono, working on a project for Why Not Prosper. She previously served as vice chair of the board of directors for Women's Way. She holds a JD and LLM in taxation from Villanova University's Charles Widger School of Law and earned her Bachelor's of Science and Bachelor's of Arts degrees from the University of Maryland, College Park. Welcome, Marguerite. And with that, I will pass this on to Marguerite to open up our panel.
Sure. Well, thank you. what an incredible way to open today's presentation. You know, I think if we called it right there, the amount of information that Diane and Kelly shared with us was enormous. But I am so excited for the panel that we have coming up next. I've spent the last couple of days getting to know some of these panelists, having some great dialogue on what we wanted to address. And these are just 4 incredible women who have a lot of passion for this topic, a lot of experiences to share, some knowledge. We're going to make sure we talk about some actionable advice that you can come away with. So we have some prepared questions. So we'll talk for about 20, 30 minutes with some prepared questions that we have, but we certainly open it up for your questions after that. And if, hard to save it to the end, we're talking about something you want to make sure you get in, definitely put it in the question answer. We'll be monitoring that closely, but we will have a dedicated section at the end of today's program for audience question and answer. So with that, we heard everybody's bio, but one of my favorite things to ask people is, kind of what's not on your resume? What don't I know from this? So I'd love to go around the panel here and just talk about a little bit more, why you chose to be on this panel and perhaps a little bit more about what your organization does or your shared experience that brings you here today. So I'm just going to go around the horn. We'll start with Allison.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm a 27-year veteran in the financial services industry, and I grew up with a single mom, very low socioeconomic level. She was a waitress and a cleaning lady, would come home with wads of $1 bills. And so my job at 8, 9 was to essentially help her budget for the week. That was my introduction to money, to finance, and realizing that while you didn't necessarily need money to make you happy in life, you certainly needed it to go to the next step and to have greater independence. So I've committed at least the last 15 years to financial literacy with different programs, and I was very honored to be asked to do this panel.
Wonderful, thank you. And I will look over to Yocasta next.
Thank you, Marguerite. It is also a pleasure. I want to know first if you can hear me and see me, because I was having some challenges at the beginning. Perfect. So it is a pleasure to be here today. So thank you so much for the invitation. Something that is not in my bio. First, I had 3 kids, which I was like, I should have put that on the bio. But what I'm doing this work is, and what I'm so passionate about this conversation, as an immigrant, not even first generation, who moved to the United States 21 years ago, I understand the struggle that our community has in understanding what it means saving and financing. We believe that we know until we realize that we don't know what we don't know. And having the opportunity to provide or to share the resources available and the little bit that I have learned with the group of amazing people that I have been working and mentors, I am delighted to do it and make sure that also we pass the knowledge to the generation to come, such as my girls, to make sure that they understand the concept of wealth, generational wealth, in meaning to retirement in a healthy and safe way, and that we cannot rely only in Social Security, which I have my father who deceased 4 years ago, and he believed that that was his retirement plan, Social Security, and it wasn't a struggle. It was hard to navigate the system. Such an age, he was almost 80. So I want to make sure that we will have the right information before time to retirement, which is 65. We need to start educating our kids as early as possible. So you can see I'm really passionate about this topic, and it's extremely personal to me. Thank you.
I love that. Thank you so much. Tree, how about you?
Sorry. Hi, everyone. I'm so honored to be here. My name is Tree Muldrow. I'm with the Crossroads Women's Center in Germantown, Philadelphia. And I guess what got, really piqued my interest in this was that we are campaigning for a care income for people on the planet. So we believe that, caregiving is the most important work that we can do. We are raising the humans on the planet and taking care of the earth that we live in. So, and that's something that is not valued by our capitalistic society, and we're striving to get that done. And another thing that, really has gotten my interest in this is that, I am one of those people that had to depend on Social Security for their retirement. I didn't retire. I was disabled. I had to go on disability in my 40s. So I really didn't have a plan. I was raising 3 young children and then negotiating disability with raising a family. And then after that, having to take care of my own parents who were disabled on Social Security. And now, after they passed, I myself am on Social Security under the care of a low-paid caregiver who also takes care of her children, one of whom is disabled. So I just see how this perpetuates itself, and it's got to stop now. We have to empower women, mothers, caregivers, and empower them financially. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And certainly not least Soledad. You're on mute. We knew it was going to happen one of these times.
And it was going to happen with me. Okay, now everyone else won't make that mistake. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to talk with all of you tonight. I'm here because as a child of immigrants, I grew up in the United States. I had citizenship, and yet I didn't know about retirement until I was 32 years old. At that time, I got sick, and I was a previous teacher, and I was put on disability, and for the first time in my life, I realized I was worried about money. And not because I had come from money, it's just that I had always worked. I'd been working since the age of 16. And at 32, I no longer could work. And yet I had 2 children that I had to provide for. And at that time, I started reading personal finance books, and I realized, man, I could have been investing in a Roth IRA since I was earned income at the age of 16, but I didn't know that. There was so much I didn't know. And now that I have had access to that information, I'm just passionate about spreading it around, and also understanding, like, for everyone, like, I want to take the shame out of talking about money. A lot of times we blame ourselves. We think, it was a personal issue, and I want us to create space and acknowledge all the systemic barriers that we all have to face in order to build financial security.
Thank you. And all of the introductions, there's so much to unpack and everything that you all just said. So I'm looking forward to talking more directly about some of the issues and factors you all talked about. So at the top of the program, we heard Diane say the astounding statistic of 80% of women are likely to be living in poverty by the age of 65. So I'd love to start off today's discussion, just talk about what some of the factors and drivers of that are. And Yocasta, if you would lead us off on that discussion.
Thank you so much. We all know that women will have experienced a substantial improvement in the labor market over the last several decades. And that is not a secret. The speed of all of the improvement that women have made in education, employment outcome, the simple answer is that we are still making less money than men. As competitive as we are still making less money. That means that we don't have enough to save. Therefore, those resources, we are not preparing for retirement because of the gender gap. And I have a few other issues that they are kind of perpetuating in reference for us to not be prepared for retirement. Some of them are women are more likely to work part-time and less likely to have employer to sponsor retirement plans. Women take more time away from work to take care for their kids, caregiving for their parents, aging parents, which AARP advocate for caregiving, and other responsibility in the household. So that impacts significantly the impact on women in total retirement and saving and income. So the next one is, too a few of us save for retirement, and I think that was a path across multiple of the speakers in today's panel, that even though we thought that we knew, we realized that we didn't know because we never saved, we were never prepared. That happen quite often. One good thing from those key elements is we live longer. That is great, we live longer. We normally tend to retire at 65, we live until 85, which is 20 years. So 20 years that we're not working, but we are living from our savings and retirement plan. Most likely Social Security, that means that we have more burden because we have more expenses and healthcare costs, cost of living, and so on. We tend to be widow because we live longer. So we are alone taking care of ourselves and our family and the household. Low-income family, they tend to have mortgage until age of retirement. Normally you hear, I have my house paid, my kids are in college. Now I am retired, let's buy a condo in the Caribbean or in Miami, but in reality, that's not the truth. There is really a small percentage of us who can afford that life. And at the end, for those factors, we women tend to live in poverty, and we are the largest population of the Asian community living in poverty, and it's still challenging through that.
Soledad, I see you nodding a lot. Is there anything that you wanted to add on to that at the end?
Yeah, I just also think the fact that we have, this financial literacy gap, right? Like I was 32 years old when I started learning about investment accounts that I had read. I was only reading because I was on bed rest, right? Like I graduated with a bachelor's and master's from NYU. No one gave me any financial education there, throughout my entire schooling. And right now in public schools, there are very few states that even mandate certain financial literacy courses for people to take. So it's hard. And even in this world of Google, right? Like you can't Google words that you don't even know exist. So I always feel like the need to say like Roth IRA, solo 401k, index funds. I always want to share these words because it's like people don't necessarily know what to research.
I love that. You're so right.
Marguerite, can I add something to that?
Absolutely.
So I got really excited because Soledad mentioned that she's so right. Even for preparing for today's panel, I was, I learned that, as I said, as a not even first generation immigrant, I learned that myself, right? As a really, I would say my 30s as well. But I also preparing for today's panel, I want to use simple words for the people who are attending this panel who really need this information. They can connect with what we are sharing today, because it's not only the education and financial literacy, it's also the conversation that we have in our families, the culture that we share. Women are the caretakers, men are the provider. So we tend to never talk about finance and budget and how much do you make and how much we're going to be saving. So it is a lot of elements that start within our family, within our culture, then pass to the education, and then I will say, quote, quote, through the implementation as an adult, right? In order for us to prepare for retirement. But yes, it's interesting how we share similitudes in our path in reference to the education and prepare for retirement and saving.
Marguerite, can I add one point?
Absolutely.
I was going to say to both Yocasta and Soledad, it is the whole industry of money is a language. And so if you're bilingual, you've had the experience of, okay, I've had to learn this other language, but money in and of itself, like the Roth IRA comment, if you don't know, then you don't know, like you have no bandwidth or even idea of what to ask. So whether it's, asking for a raise, saving, investing, what is inflation, talking to the person at the bank, like if you don't have the proper language, this is a huge barrier for people. And so I think for all of us kind of taking this, the force of like, let's communicate with each other. Is it our family? Is it our friends? Is it our kids, nieces, nephews? Asking all the questions I don't know, explain it to me again, till we get to a point where we all truly understand. We're not going to have the parity unless it's an open conversation all the time, every time about money.
Thank you. And Tree, I see you've got your hand raised. Floor is yours.
Yeah, I think, and to add on to that, the gender barrier is so great in that, because in the traditional patriarchal society that we live in, we assume that it's the the breadwinner is even though, you know, women now, you know, are more equitable as far as, you know, have more equity as far as jobs and everything, still in society's mind, the breadwinner is the male. And that information, that that financial education and wealth is held away from women. It's not encouraged in the schools. You know, things like that should be started in elementary, you know, school, or at least middle school and high school, so that children coming out of, you know, children, as soon as they get their first job, learn to invest. And that, you know, it's not, you have to depend on your husband, partner, father, boss, you know, even to give you that information. You know, we're so dependent on others to give us that information, where, you know, it should be ours. We should own it, and we should pass it down to our families, our children, and everything else, but it's being withheld from us to a great extent.
Thank you so much for that. Tree, actually, if you'll take yourself back off mute, so you were talking there about some gender barriers. Would you go further and talk about some barriers that women of color face in addition to the gender barrier?
Well, I've just put it in my experience. I'm 70 years old, and when I was growing up, women of color, you know, the jobs were, you were either you know, you graduated from high school. If you graduated from high school, you either got married and started a family, were a homemaker. You became a job in clerical work or you know, retail, or you went to college. And your college, at least what was presented to me as college choices, were basically service choices, teacher, social worker, nurse. And that was for women of color. You know, there were outliers that had other jobs and you know, positions, but mainly that was what, you know, we were offered. And then you take into the fact that, you know, we're all, you know, I raised a family. I graduated from college. You know, I wanted a career, but I also wanted to raise my children when they were young. Well, that child raising, the caregiving, was not acknowledged as work, as really valuable. But the jobs that I was offered were basically professional caregiving jobs, which was really ironic. And their pay rate was sort of based on that assumption. This is caregiving work. This is women's work. It's not, you know, we're not going to pay as much. And, you know, you didn't have the wealth. You didn't accrue the wealth that a man would accrue in that same job or in other, you know, jobs as a college graduate, as a semi-professional, whatever. There was that big pay disparity because it was looked at as women, caring was women's work. And that's just something that you do. You know, that's your destiny, sort of, you know, to just give your all to, you know, it wasn't valued in the economy. And when you look at the drivers of the economy, the gross national product, you know, women and mothers, especially caregivers, you know, do provide so much unpaid work, unrecorded work, or unacknowledged money, wealth in the country. And I think, you know, I'm not sure if I answered your question, but anyway.
You did. It was perfect. We do have, everybody's loving your wisdom, Chair. I'm looking in our chat here. We have a participant that asked if you could also talk about the financial limitations that people with disabilities get.
Oh, wow. I think the main driver with me was, well, being on Social Security, number one. You could only make a certain amount of money. Even after I was able to work part-time, I was never able to work full-time. I would have a limit to the amount of money I could make, which is a very low amount, which really couldn't, you know, I was raising 3 children. So it really didn't, you know, provide enough money. So I had to work part-time. But one month I made $3 over my monthly limit, and my Social Security was cut off completely. I had to reapply for Social Security disability because I made $3 over the maximum amount in 1 month. It took me 3 months to get my Social Security back. I mean, that's one thing. Another thing is when you're on disability, you know, sometimes you have to, you miss work for either health reasons or medical reasons or just accessibility. You know, there's so many limitations. The accessibility, the health benefits, you know, you have to be constantly thinking, well, will, you know, my insurance pay my medical bills? Is it, you know, better for me to be on medical assistance? You know, should I not even go off of work because my copays are so high? You know, even if I do have insurance, it's just like there's a constant recalculation that you have to do almost daily. And, you know, plus the fact that people with a disability are looked at as less than. And if you have a so-called invisible disability, sometimes it's even worse because, you know, people start putting their own labels on you, assuming this, assuming that, you know, and you're almost forced to explain yourself, which, you know, it's not anybody's business, basically. So your humanity is brought down a lot in the workplace with a disability. There's, you know, not so many, there's a ceiling is lower. There's, you know, not so many opportunities to advance in your job. There's so many, you know, artificial limitations that they can assume that you have because you have a disability. And they're arbitrarily put on, you know, people that they don't apply to at all. So yeah, you know, there's all kinds of things, you know, the extra expenses of being disabled that your insurance doesn't cover. You know, it can be even something like clothing. For certain people have certain disabilities, they have to have specialized clothing. They have to have, you know, what do you call, you know, accessory. I can't even think of the word, but you know, there's just expenses that are hidden. I mean, for one, I have a crazy hidden one. I have a service dog. That's an expense. You know, there's just a lot of things that you know, at face value, people don't realize it. I'm not the best person to speak on this but you know, there are so many hidden expenses and confinements that you have being on disability.
Can I ask Tree a question? I have a son who's disabled and is now 18, trying to make it. What is the most valuable resource you've navigated through or found? Is it a nonprofit? Is it a government agency? What's the best advocacy group you've encountered?
Oh, there's not one, you know, I haven't really researched it that much, but there are so many, you know, as a situation changes, there's no organization that has a blanket can help everybody, you know, so it depends on what your issue is at the time, and your issues change. That's another thing. As you age, as you move on, you know, your issues change. So you can, you know, especially if you have a son that's disabled now, his issues are going to be a lot different than they will be when he's, you know, 30. So I have a son who has MS, who had to go on disability at 40 himself, you know, and he you know, I tried to tell him, you know, teach my children, you have to be prepared for things like this because it happened to me about the same age, and his son is, you know, about the same age as he was when I became disabled. So, you know, it's something that, you know, you don't think is going to hit until it hits. And as far as resources, you just have to, you know, you have to expend so much energy looking for resources, you know, specific to your disability. But then there's so many other things. There's, you know, there's no one-stop shopping. There's financial, there's medical, there's housing, there's labor, there's, you know, transportation. There's so many different things that you have to consider.
Thank you. And I was reflecting, Tree, when you were just talking on some of our conversations we had, and I'm going to give you a break from answering, although we appreciate your sharing. I'm going to go over to Soledad and see if she'll talk to us a little bit about some of the historical barriers. You know, myself as a trust and estate attorney background, I'm aware of just the importance of legal representation and good estate planning and the launching pad that intergenerational wealth can have on next generation. If you could talk a little bit more about some of these factors that compound the widening of the gap, we'd definitely appreciate that.
Well, this could take all night because there is so much, and historically, that has impacted people's ability to build financial security in this country. Some things that just come to mind quickly right now, like we're gonna start from now moving backwards, right? I'm thinking about the LGBT community who hasn't always had the right to marriage, that wasn't protected, which means that they also didn't have access to something called spousal IRAs, which is just a regular IRA, but under spousal regulations. Even if you don't personally have earned income, you could use your partner's income to invest in an IRA, which that wasn't something that became even accessible to us until there was rules around that in the 1980s. So think about that. Think about being somebody who was at home taking care of your children and you didn't have access to an employer retirement account, and you couldn't even invest in an individual retirement account because spousal IRA regulations weren't a thing. So that impacts people. I can think about, just the access of, in terms of like your when emergencies happen, because emergencies always do happen, right? Like that's life. There's going to be times like, what safety net do you have? What access does your family have to resources? Thinking about the Black community and redlining and everything that has been stolen from them for generations, impacting their access to, generational wealth, and how that impacts like their children and whether they get to have, money for a down payment, or money to go to college, or money if, emergencies come up. And this is something that happens in for a lot of marginalized communities.
Thank you. I'm being conscious of time. I want to make sure when we were talking about objectives of today's panel, I know one of the things we were really all focused on is making sure we were able to give some actionable advice. And for those listening that are looking for advice, what can we offer them? I'm going to start over with you, Allison. What advice, what pathways for women to start saving for the future, or what to do?
I have kind of 5 key points, and this is where in my over 2 decades, I've seen very wealthy people do, and people who are kind of coming from one socioeconomic level to another, is 1, create a plan, right? Written down or on a spreadsheet, but it's been communicated with a friend, a partner, kids, parents, someone who's got your back, someone who's going to help you be accountable. It could be a money mentor, is what I like to call them. It's somebody at an organization or a friend who's going to help you with that plan. It should be written down in most cases, and it should be focused on what your current income is in any way, shape, or form. Is it disability? Is it, a paycheck? Is it hourly? Is it, per month? Whatever the income is, and really maximizing, how do you get more income? Do you ask for a raise? Do you do 2 jobs, right? Trying to navigate. One of the main resources we have is how much we make throughout our careers, our lives. And if we know that we're already up against a headwind and that women make significantly less than male equivalents, asking for the raise. So as I do these teach-ins for young women, it's, a few months in to a new job, asking, what do I need to do to get a raise? That is something that can dramatically impact and improve our ability to retire at some point. Making sure we have a handle of expenses. That's really number 2. is the debt pay down. If you need help, there are so many different nonprofit organizations that can help you with debt pay down, but understanding kind of what you have in terms of money coming in, what you have going out, that making that budget, making it very efficient so the debt management is handled. Thinking about that emergency savings, that's the next step. I think Soledad, you kind of touched upon some of that, is having some kind of a backstop or a rainy day fund that if something happens, you have a little bit of extra money. Typically it's 3 months of your living expenses at the very least, but something so that you can access easily. It's cash in a checking account, in a savings account, but it is easily accessible for you if and when something happens. 4, getting to the point where you can invest for your future. And that is it through an IRA, as someone mentioned? Is it through 401k? But looking at speaking to your employer about what options they have for you to get invested. One key thing I've always talked to women about, and they often don't realize this, is if you're investing through a 401k, which is through a company, it's a retirement plan for a company, that money is yours for life. It's tied to your social security number. It is not owned by the company. It's owned by you. They, in some cases, match and put money in if you put money in, but that money is always yours. And there may be some restrictions, some penalties for you not to be able to touch that money until you're 59 or older, but it's important for you to start tucking money away. And we would always say, this is hard kind of numbers, is 80% of your money coming in is often going to the living expenses you have day to day. And if you can, target 20% of your incoming money to your future. Super hard to do. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, very difficult to do because prices are so expensive. So you start small. You start with 1%, 2%, right? And over your life, over your 30s or 40s or 50s, you're hopefully getting to a point where you're able to tuck more money away for your future. That's kind of the key thing that a lot of people do. They kind of build this building plan. They have the budget. They have the debt pay down. They have the savings account for emergency. And then they're starting to invest in their future. And this is where I think there are advocacy groups, financial organizations like this one that we're speaking on today that can help you with that financial mentoring. And then the last thing I'll say is the socialization around money. Again, speaking to creating that plan, writing it down, speaking to somebody or people who can help you. You don't have to tell them everything you make and everything you earn and your social security number, but at least getting somebody to help, right? Hey, how did you pay off that credit card? Hey, how did so-and-so get a mortgage? Having more open conversations about money, whether you have it or not, or trying to get to that next level, really helps us all create a better community for inclusion, and that there is an abundance of money to be had. If it is something that we are so tight-lipped about and we're not going to share it, it is then, somebody has it and somebody doesn't. So the more we discuss it, kind of what people have and don't have and how they're getting to that next level, the more I think money trickles down to all people.
Yocasta, I think you took yourself off mute. Did you want to add anything to that? Otherwise, I'm coming to you next for our next question.
Yes, I want to add something to that. Those are great points. But I believe that before we embark in creating that path of success, make sure that you ask questions. It is okay to let other people that you don't know, that you don't understand, and make sure that you understand what is your position at the moment in time when you want to create a saving plan. Because if you're making less than $40,000 paying for daycare, mortgage, car insurance, it is okay to put it on hold while you work with your expenses. And we need to be comfortable to that. Where in life are we? We need to have the knowledge, we need to have the education, but we also need to be comfortable and not punish ourselves for not being able to save for retirement in certain time in our life. Having that path for success and passing that information to our kids, I think will be ideal. Because again, being not even a first generation immigrants who moved to the United States when I was 20, it is really difficult to navigate the system and to feel comfortable to ask questions and to sit down with an advisor. But I think this is a great plan for success. Just make sure that you don't feel that you're not educated enough, that you don't know enough. We don't know enough, neither of us. So it is okay. I just want to share that piece.
I love that. Yes, none of us ever stop learning. There's so much in this area of finances to understand and wrap your head around. We're certainly, I mean, number of experts at this table, but everybody keeps learning. Conscious of the time, it is 5 o'clock. I've promised the audience, question and answer. I know people have been very active in the chat. Certainly, if you have a question, please, you can put it in the chat. I'm monitoring that. If you want to put it in question and answer, I'm monitoring that too. Knowing that the people have to type their questions, I am going to tee up another question that I'll keep looking. So, thinking of the different audience members that could be on, we talked about what can individuals do to save for themselves, but we know there's a lot of influencers and advocates on the phone. What kind of policy changes should we be advocating for? What should we be speaking up for? I don't know if Yocasta, you want to start there? Maybe Soledad, you want to add on? Sure. Thank you. Again, I'm going to go back. I think I want to emphasize and understanding our culture, where we are in this moment in time, because I know we beat ourselves with this topic over and over and over. We need to understand that more than 50 million Americans doesn't have access to retirement plan, regardless of the gender. It is a big challenge. It is a struggle that the country is facing that is not only us, Black and Brown community, is not only us, women. So let's put that out there. And more than a quarter of that number are non-retiree adults, meaning they're younger. They're not even at the age of retirement. Also, Social Security isn't enough to depend, as I started, depend on having a healthy and safe retirement plan. We all know that it's a great foundation to start. It's the money that is there for us as we work. So knowing that within AARP, we have been working in a piece of legislation at the federal level and at the state level, which is called Work and Save, which is a policy that helps employees save money automatically out of their regular paycheck. Also, while supporting the small business community by providing a small business with low cost for retirement options. We also know that workers are 50 times more likely to save retirement when they are taking out of the payroll deduction, because it's something when we don't see it, when we don't feel it, it hurts less, right? So it's easier for us to save. And that is the piece of legislation that internally we have been advocating across the country in order to make sure that we all have retirement saving for retirement, that we have a healthy saving retirement life when at the age of 65, but I'm not sure if we will be able to retire anymore at the age of 65 in this moment in time. Thank you. Soledad, did you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I also think we need to make sure that we have childcare, affordable childcare, accessible to people, that we also consider, the minimum wage, have people have extra money that they could even start to feel like they can save and invest on a consistent basis. Other things that come to mind, policies around Roth IRAs and individual retirement accounts. Right now, like, someone can't use their Social Security income, they cannot use alimony, they can't use there's only certain types of income that they are even allowed to invest. And if they do, then they'll get penalized for it. Also, there's a barrier in terms of how much money people can have saved in order to get access to Section 9 housing. And it's like people have to be in this decision where it's like, wait, I don't make enough money to afford, my own living situation, and yet I make too much to continue to live here paycheck to paycheck. And I think we really need to understand, like, the factors that are keeping people poor and make people think that they can't earn more income, because if they do that, they risk losing their homes, they risk losing certain benefits.
Thank you. I absolutely appreciate all of the additional color you added. We do have a question here in the, oh, Tree, you want to say something?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to add that I think it's, very important for us, to acknowledge the work that carers and caregivers do, and to, when you consider like Social Security, the child raising years are your 0 years in Social Security when they give you the points for your Social Security benefit. So if you were, spent your first 10, 12 years of your adulthood taking care of children or family, or maybe even 20 years if you have several children, that's not counted. I mean, that's work. And I think another point I wanted to bring up was I think, one of the solutions that would help, especially the low paid caring work, is to have a care income for all caregivers, whether they're for children, disabled parents, elderly parents, and for students too, so that they, everyone would get a monthly sum to take care of themselves, the people that they care for, and in the case of students, to live off of, because they're our future. This is just an investment in the future. It's not welfare. It's what people earn through their hard work. And I think we need to support that. In United Kingdom, they do have benefits for parents, mostly mothers, that care for children, and the disabled also. And those they do get points towards their pensions. So it can be done. I mean, it's nothing impossible. It's a viable solution.
Thank you. I'm glad you raised your hand. I tried to give you a little bit of break because it was we'd put you on the spot there for a little bit. So we do have a question that I want to bring up, and as I read it, Allison, I'm gonna call on you first. So the question is, how much of the issue is lack of advocating for yourself or planning within a regulated workplace versus women not having access to those workplaces due to the disproportionate part-time work or caregiver burdens?
Well, I would say the vast majority of the issue is systemic, as it ties to women not having access to the workplaces, the disability, the caregiving, right? That whole burden that we bear. And then, once we recognize that, right, this is the burden, this is the hill we have to climb. And undoubtedly women of color, even a bigger burden hill to climb. So recognizing that, right? Yes, I have this, but then it's okay. Can I go out into the group, learn the language of money, somehow advocate for myself, or get these resources in place? Sadly, the financial services industry, banking industry, was created for men by men, period. It is not one that is structurally allowing women to thrive, women of color to thrive. And you think about it, we couldn't even get our own credit cards in the 70s. Like it's got a long way to go. I see structurally in the last 2 years, some really good changes where there are more and more women advocacy groups allowing that change, allowing women to have that resource. But it's still, we've got a long way to go, and women can advocate all they want if it's structurally not fixed. As we get paid and for caregiving, it's still a really high mountain to climb.
Yocasta, I saw you take yourself off mute. I think you wanted to possibly jump in.
But I would say still advocate for more money every day of every job you have.
I think Allison said it all. I didn't unmute myself. I think I was on mute all this time, but now you put me. It's okay. I think that what Allison said was not in my head because she hit it in the nail. We also need to think that this is about that. This topic is not only a gender gap inequality, it is a race. It is a race gap inequality when we think that women make difference, because Black and brown women and white women have a difference, which is a systematic inequality there, that we also need to address that. Yes, we want equal pay across the board, but we also want equal pay. We need to make baby steps. And I think one of the steps first that we need to advocate is that one, all women should be making equal. But yeah, I think Allison hit it in the nail.
Perfect. Well, you segued me up perfectly with that. I was trying to think of, we talked about what people should be doing, individuals should be doing for themselves. We talked about some policies, and what can, and Soledad, I'm going to call on you. What could employers be doing in this space to help bridge and shorten this gap?
Yeah, I would love to see that all employers offer an employer retirement account and that they're able to match it. That's not something that is accessible everywhere. It also has, certain, it's easier said than done, right? Because then we start thinking about small businesses and what kind of tax deductions we can provide to really incentivize employers providing employer retirement accounts, and then also providing education, right? Because part of it, like, I was 23 years old when I started working as a teacher, and I was in a meeting, and for the first time ever, I had access to a 403B. So I had access to a retirement account. I had no idea what I was supposed to do. And gratefully, I had a coworker who said to me, put $500 in there a month. Just set that up. And that $500 that I just put in for 4 years, like in total, I put in $24,000. By the time I was 32 and I checked the account again, I was no longer working. I was at home with my children, had grown, that $24,000 had grown to $86,000. Right? That was the only kind of education I had received. And I even think my coworkers selected what my assets were going to be. The amount of stuff that a lot of people just don't have access to, that don't have any understanding. So I'd like to see that employers are providing retirement accounts and also providing education, since schools still don't do it.
Thank you. Kind of going around the horn here. So we've got what you can do for yourself, what policies, what employers can do. Now, Allison, I know you have a background like myself, working with some high net worth individuals, some of whom could be on this call. What could funders or philanthropists be doing in this space? Obviously, this is the problem that needs to be attacked from all sides, right? So yeah. What could those individuals be doing?
I think about women's small businesses and small businesses of people of color, and men and women, but trying to give them equal access to funding. And so I think the stats are for all women funding teams, like they have a small business and they're trying to go that next step, they get less than 2% of the capital, less than 2%. And when we think about Black women, they raised 0.35%. So it's so prohibitive for young, or not even young, but women and women of color founders to go and get new money to, build a second office or branch or expand, whatever they want to do. It's simply, there's not there. So if you are someone on this call or people trying to get funding, making a business plan. Again, I go back to having a money mentor, someone who has done it, someone who is willing to give you time to kind of help with, here's your pitch book, and going after, forget the all white male groups, going after groups that might actually look at women and women of color in terms of new founders. So kind of targeting that rich environment, if you will.
Perfect, thank you. And as you're talking, I remembered, I wanted to make sure, I think we've said it, but resources and different links for information will be sent after this as a follow-up to those who registered for today's panel. So I know there's a lot of amazing action going on in the chat and links and website devices, but it is getting going to be compiled for all of you. So I did want to make sure we said that. Just checking out the time. We probably have time for one more question here. if each of you could talk a little bit about, so obviously you've all talked about your own journey and your background and what you do. If somebody could share, kind of bridge the gap, how they got to where they are, maybe a little bit more about their personal journey of, I don't know, Soledad, you're nodding out, so I might call on you. You talked about that moment of disability. I mean, here you are with your own company and you're giving financial advice. Like, bring that together. How'd you get there?
Yeah, kind of like a miracle. That's how I think about it. I got sick. I started to learn and I started talking about it on Instagram, on social media, because people in my life didn't want to talk about money. I had decided to create a plan to pay off my debt. I paid off all my student loans when I was 33. That was the thing. I wanted to be debt-free before 33. And when I reached that milestone, I shared it on Instagram and nobody responded. There wasn't a clap. There wasn't a celebration. It was just crickets. And I started thinking, am I the only one who still had student loan debt in my 30s? Are people judging me because I have children and I still had student loan debt? So I reached out to my friends in a text message thread and I said, I'm 32 years old with 2 kids, and this is the least amount of money I've ever had in my life. I've been working since I was 16 and I'm nervous. I'm nervous of what this is going to be like. And none of my friends responded, not a thumbs up, not a heart, nothing, no response. So then I really, really thought I'm the only one. I'm the only one. And despite, navigating, growing up in a low-income neighborhood, graduating from a high school with a 54% dropout rate and attending college, I still am so behind. That's what I had internalized. And I figured the only way I was going to continue to move out of that and learn more information was to surround myself with people who were willing to talk dinero with me. And that was strangers online. And so while para todos, I started sharing how I was trying to save an emergency fund, which for my family was $30,000 for a 6-month emergency fund. And I thought it was impossible. It was like, how would we ever do something like that? So I just started sharing my journey online and I connected with people and people all said, oh, and as soon as you get your emergency fund, are you going to start investing? And I was like, investing? Oh, no, I'm a stay-at-home mom. They're like, oh, but you could still invest through a Roth IRA. And I just started to learn. And eventually I was like, you know what? I'm going to study to become a certified financial planner. Currently, less than 23% of certified financial planners are women and less than 4% are either Black or Latino. And so I segued into that.
Thank you. So, I didn't know fully what your journey was going to look like, but I knew it was going to be an amazing one worth sharing. Yocasta, I'm looking at you on my screen. Would you mind sharing a little bit about yours?
Sure. Soledad, I will reach out to you after this event for sure. I love when she shared dinero, ¿verdad? And in my personal journey, I'm sorry I had to repeat one again and again and again that I moved to the United States 20 years ago and I didn't know anything. Right? I didn't know anything. And then when my father, because moving to the United States, thinking about Social Security, then for us, you said you just need to work, time to retirement, you're going to be living through your Social Security. That's information that my grandmother, mi abuela, passed to us. So, and then my father retired and I learned that he was getting $350 a month to survive and how we're going to be surviving with that. And we didn't have any plan B. And I didn't know, as Soledad, I didn't know. I was forced to learn. And then when my former life, I work at the Chamber of Commerce, at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And then I realized that was not only me, this is a cultural barrier. Then you are working with the business community, with the Black and Brown community, with the Latino business community. You understand they own business, but they don't know how to manage money. They don't know what is a saving account, a retirement plan. So how they're gonna have paid sick leave? How they're going to pay for vacation, how they're going to grow their business, and it start all of the nuances. And it was kind of a really, really dark moment when you realize instead of celebrating that it's not only you, you start saying why this is happening to all of us. Where are the resources? Where is the financial literacy available? Where are the resources that Allison mentioned? And that's what I got interested in getting more information, making sure that our family knows about this, and working with AARP, thinking about the older population in our community, how they are preparing for retire. And this is not happening yet. This is not happening in any part of the country. We have an incredible percentage of Hispanic Latino who are educated, who have college degrees, who have saving accounts, but it is a really small percentage for the large population of Latino living in the United States. So a lot of work to do, but one by one, we're gonna get it done. And that's how I got here. And I'm really excited to be in this platform learning that more work is getting done to make sure that we educate the community and that more resources are available and in our own language. Sorry for being biased. Having Soledad that knows that she speaks Spanish, as soon as she said dinero, I was like, yes. So because that is an access that we need for our community.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to continue on the horn. I think people really love to hear this. Allison, will you share next?
Sure. I mentioned, I grew up very low socioeconomic levels, and my mom was on welfare. And I just know from an early age, she was limited, and this was in the early 70s, what she could get access to, just simply because the financial services industry was not geared for women, let alone single women with jobs that, she didn't have a big paycheck. And so from that early on, the best thing she did was allow me to be curious about money and ask questions. And even though she wouldn't know, she would say, well, come into the bank with me. And I would just ask random questions. Well, what's a mortgage? What's this? What's that? And I think from her standpoint, she pushed in a way that was like, if you want to have a better life with more, choices, then you need to be able to make more money than I have, like kind of expand that. And I learned then that, again, while money doesn't buy you happiness, it certainly allows you these choices. So I went on and got an undergraduate degree, and I found a job that basically paid for my undergraduate degree. So I worked for a big bank as a teller, mostly Latino clients, businesses. And so kind of from that aspect, went on and had another job, pay for another degree, and kind of moved that way. But love investments in finance. And it was something that I was curious about, and said, I want to work where there is money, so I'm never poor again. And then I've done financial literacy because I think it is something that if more families allowed their kids to be more open about those financial discussions, right? Whether they know it or they don't, or they have money or they don't, whatever it is, just open about those conversations and allowing the kids to be curious, that hopefully expands their ability to kind of lift all boats in the family. I think that was my upbringing. I think it served me very well. And I would encourage all of us, if we have peers, Soledad, you said your family, like if we have peers that we can talk to and help them with finances and money and debt pay down, whatever it is, the world is ultimately a better place.
Thank you so much. And Tree, we started a lot with your personal journey and narrative. If there's anything else you want to add, we are certainly all open ears. And I will also say, if there's any takeaway that you want to provide our audience today, what would that be?
Well, I guess I'm the poster mother for not planning for retirement, or the financial trials, investments that would help me later on in life. But as Allison said, my children learning from my experience, from their experience, and living with me, stressing out day to day, getting food on the table, that kind of thing, they became very astute at budgeting, at saving, at earning, and they have all become investors, which I'm very thankful for. But that shouldn't be the way that it has to be. I mean, especially I feel that they were at a disadvantage because I, as a woman, did not have that kind of training, or there was not that kind of expectation for me to be knowledgeable on investing and retirement and just just financial knowledge. So what I think, my two takeaways is that we need to start with young people. We need to start this with children in school. We need to discuss this with our families, intergenerationally. If you have elders, if you're, find out, what they're getting, because I think as I forget who it was said, her father was making $300 a month in Social Security. I'm sure they had no idea that it was that little. Like that can be a really light bulb moment to realize that. Younger people, check with them. Are they investing? Are they really keeping track of where their money is? Are they asking the questions that they need to ask? Or do they have the knowledge they need to know? And those buzzwords are, those things should be just a vocabulary that they teach children in school, because how would we find out if we've never even heard the wording? So I think that's very important. And let's go back to my main thing is that, we need to support women, families, especially of young children, to start that, we need to make financial equity, gender equity. We need to end child poverty. And the best way to end child poverty is to direct money into the caregiver's hands. And there are several legislations that we'll put in the chat that, we're campaigning for. But I think, in order to value the basic, caregiving is the basic basis of humanity. So in order to do that, we have to value that. It shouldn't be just, child care, institutionalized child care. It should be caregiving, which is, we shouldn't take the capitalistic idea that, children are just commodities, that raising children is, a way to establish capital. No, this is part of our humanity, and I think it should be, valued with financially.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to give everybody else a quick moment to speak. Any final thoughts? I'll just go around. Soledad, I'll start with you.
I feel like I'm going to be the advocate of Roth IRAs. I think that's what's going to be on my tombstone one day. She wanted everyone to have a Roth IRA. Check out, I hope that you'll subscribe to my newsletter. When you do, you'll have access to this free workshop on Roth IRA accounts. There's 4 steps to investing. One way most people qualify to contribute directly to a Roth IRA. And you get information too, just like how to pick assets. And it's not like I always tell everybody, if you could buy something on Amazon, then you can buy assets for an investment account. If you can, if you know how to fold the clothes and pick up the children and cook a meal, if you already know how to multi-manage things, then you could also figure out how to rebalance an account. It's the same thing. You have the skills, and it's just about becoming familiar with the language.
Awesome. Yocasta and then Allison.
I love it. I love how the conversation turned, because it was all AARP with the caregiving advocacy piece, and learning that one of the campaigns that I manage within AARP is called Livable Communities, where we advocate for community for all ages. AARP is known for advocating for the older population, but as Teresa said, this is not only about the older population, this is about the community at large. And when we come together and make sure that we also target community besides their gender, because certain community have the same issues regardless of the gender, it will be ideal. In our end, please follow AARP in our social media. Make sure that you become a mentor if you have the knowledge to one of your neighbors or your friends, because this is a really needed conversation. It is not comfortable. It is a challenging conversation, but it will be really helpful for you to help another person understand the real value of money and how they can pass the generational wealth and knowledge to their kids so they can go to college, they can pay their debt by 30, which is, I'm thinking about that still because I still am in debt from college. Soledad, congratulations. But yeah, make sure that the knowledge that you have, you pass it to somebody else because this will change their life and the life of their families.
My turn.
Allison, final thoughts? Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, adding on to the prior two speakers, which are kind of spot on in my belief, is that socialization. But it's also, if anyone's ever been on an airplane, the flight attendant says, you know, if there's an emergency, put your oxygen mask on you first and then help your others. Something I see so frequently with women in San Francisco and San Jose is they're helping other family members. And it is very difficult for them to put their retirement in front, as a priority if they're helping their kids, their grandkids, their neighbors, and other family members. So at some point, to have any kind of sustainable retirement, people do have to, especially women, have to put their own needs in front of the rest of the family members. So very difficult to balance, but that I would kind of think you got to take care of yourself to some degree first.
That was perfect. I know we're a minute or two over. Kelly, I think you wanted to bring up upcoming gender wealth gap forums to close out today's program.
Yes, absolutely. I think Diane will be sharing the screen here. So, wow, I'm blown away, and I'm sure all of our audience members and participants are blown away by all this awesome information. So we first want to thank each and every one of you for your attendance, participation, and engagement in the conversation. Thank our panelists for the wealth of experience and knowledge and information and tips and tricks that they shared with us, and our moderator for guiding the conversation so beautifully. And we want to remind folks of several things. First, that this series, Closing the Gender Wealth Gap series, is ongoing. So we'll continue to explore how to close the gender wealth gap. And we'll have the dates and topics are listed here on this slide. And we'll also continue the conversation about white supremacy and closing the gender wealth gap. We want to engage more with you, our partners and community. So definitely check out our social media and website for announcements, and follow us for more info and invitations to how to join the fight. And we also want to know how this landed for you, what you thought about today's panel and experience. So we really encourage you to take the survey. The link for that is in the chat. So let us know what resonated with you, what you want to know more about, so that we can continue to serve our community with the information we need to close the gender wealth gap. So thank you, everyone, for your participation. Thank you to our panelists and our moderator. And we just want to say thanks again. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you. You were awesome. Good night. Thank you all.
Bye.